Okay, so I am just making sure people hear. To Discord. Yes, had to make sure I got the right general one. Okay, now hopefully people get the message. And will join us soon. Let's see. Okay. Streams up. Let's come here. Do this. Just as a beginning reminder, you're going to want to have one trace tonic going and two others ready or close to ready. So, hello, Angel Goddess. Glad you could join us. How are you doing? That works. Thanks for dropping in and saying hi. So I was waiting for a little bit to see if anyone else joined. What I'm going to be doing this time, just under about a week ago, I did a live stream with my daughter where we discussed mental health because of the things going on with Animagua. And so what I'm going to be doing is talking about that. Debating on if I should drop a Burfius, but I think I'm going to wait and I'll drop it later. So that's one thing I'm going to do on this stream. So if you're interested, I'll be talking about my story, some of the things my daughter said was okay to share, whatever, when I start going. So if you're interested, you don't get to stay for the whole time, go ahead and jump back on and watch the replay. Yeah, watch it on YouTube later. So, and that's if anyone else is on and is interested, the same is true. So, I guess to begin with, if anyone hasn't watched Animagus's video, I would recommend go watch it. It's the one titled "You Are Not Alone," and he talks about his recent and probably continuous in the past mental health struggles. How I think a big part of it, I took it as, is to let people know it's not as rare as people think. NAMI says it's 1 in 5. I suspect it's possibly even more than that has mental health issues of one kind or another. Because I think there's a lot that's and underdiagnosed. I think it's one of those that not full amounts are known of, and you kind of have to guesstimate. So I'm throwing that out. So to start with, I want to make clear that everything I'm sharing here does not mean that my experience is normal for people with mental health, or what should be expected, or that anyone should judge themselves by what I'm saying. Or even judge other people, their friends, their family, anyone, by what I'm saying. My experience is just that, my experience. Your people you know, people you interact with, people online, etc., may have it worse, may have it better. And another thing to remember is some of my experiences I'm going to be talking about are in the past. And we all know that hindsight can affect things. And we can kind of become jaded through hindsight. Ooh, I'm definitely going to use that one. So, be aware of that. Do not ever judge someone based on what I'm saying, except to recommend and to encourage them getting treatment. Now, if they say they're getting treatment, accept it as such. I will say one thing with mental health is true, as with many other things. You can't really get treatment until you kind of accept that there's an issue. I'm not saying for sure that it will. I'm not saying don't report something if someone's threatening suicide and says they don't have an issue. Obviously, if they're threatening suicide, there's something wrong. Period. Accept that. But do not be upset that someone is, that you can tell someone's depressed, etc., and is not getting treatment. Support them, encourage them. Many times people are not, because of stigmas, different things like that. I can do it on my own. I don't need any help. I could go on and on. And sometimes they do not have the energy to deal with getting treatment. And I'm going to discuss that. So, don't ever judge someone for not getting treatment, but do encourage people to. Okay? I want to make that clear right off the bat. And don't expect that just because so-and-so had this experience or that experience, they went and saw this person and they're better. They don't have any signs of depression. First of all, understand that many of us, and I think I once heard that TikTok is the perfect example of this. TikTok, Instagram, etc. We can all, and other social medias, we learn to put on a face, to pretend to be who we aren't, in order to fit in to the expected norms. And I want to make it clear, that's not just people with mental health issues. Think about what you post on, generally, what you post on social media. Do you post the bad times? Do you post the fights with your family members? Do you post everything? Do you post when you're frustrated with someone mentally, that you're frustrated with them and how you feel about them when you're angry, while you're angry with them? And if you do, congratulations, you're one of the few people that do. I'm not saying you don't, but I will say you're one of the few people who do. And in some ways that can be something to be proud of, that you have learned to accept yourself enough that I'm looking for something. That's not what I'm after. Not after that one. But you've learned to accept yourself enough that I'll go look for that later, that you don't need to do that. But frequently that's not the case. Frequently people struggle with accepting themselves, accepting others, and especially showing the harder parts of life. People, honestly, anyone who's done YouTube knows one of the best, easiest ways to lose viewership is to be down all the time. Down, angry, depressed, etc., etc. Or appear that way. You won't get viewership, so you put on a face. And you act all happy and like everything's perfect in the world and everything else in order to get that viewership. Honestly, having a YouTube channel for many people is very likely to cause problems if there may be mental issue problems, especially depression. It's more likely to bring that about. On top of that, everything going on with COVID, circumstances, etc., are also more likely to bring that about. So you've got a perfect storm of someone who does YouTube videos right now. They're dealing with the separation, with etc., all of that, and having to be happy-go-lucky, etc., while at the same time many of people's support systems are gone. And now another thing to be aware of is many times on top of all that, you also have many people who have depression to certain levels that have learned coping techniques. One thing to remember is depression frequently runs in families. So you've got a family who has symptoms of depression. And now, who has members who are depressed. And so let's say mom has some depression. Mom's going to teach children, I hate to do this, but I'm going to leave because I am not going to be stuck while I'm driving. That would not be fair to people.
You only have to buy one of these.
Okay.
The other one was more of an impulse buy, but they looked nice and they felt nice.
How much?
The second pair was like $10. The first
Okay.
pair was like $8.
So which one?
The $8.
So I owe you $8 on top of the what we talked about, 84.
Yeah.
So 92. So he was shopping for shoes.
Yeah, because one of my shoes has a hole.
It needs help. It almost has more than one hole.
Oh, no, yeah. So, the bottom of these shoes were terrible. It was like this weird, like, plasticky, like, black crap. And it peeled. And it kept on getting in my way while I was working, so I had to tear it off. Because it was hindering me from working. And that happened on both of them.
Okay.
So, I'm never getting these types of pairs of shoes again. Because that sucks.
Okay, so back to what I was saying. A mom with depression, different things like that, teaches their children... What? Yeah. Teaches their children... You don't have to ask those if you won't. Just grab one. Thank you for asking, but yeah. So teaches their children ways to cope and live. Or if they struggle too hard, you might not. It's similar with, honestly, depression could be looked at as a chronic illness. And all mental illnesses really are. That's what they are. They're chronic illnesses. So, anyone who has a chronic illness that's genetic knows that families pass down coping techniques to deal with those chronic illnesses. People who diabetes runs in their family, type 1 diabetes. And David, now that David's here, he can vouch for this. The idea of sticking yourself with a needle isn't out of the ordinary. It's, what big deal. You just learn to, and your meals are, you learn to eat certain types of meals and stuff like that. It's just kind of a habit.
So, there are a couple of factors. One, it depends on the region. Because let's say you live in Korea, you're going to be used to eating other foods than if you lived in America. And dealing with other situations and unique situations. Now, the thing with needles is that, yes, family can help, but it really depends on the person.
Well, and I'll give you that, but I'm saying it's kind of, those types of things get passed down with chronic illness. With our EDS, the ability to deal with pain has just it's kind of something that, okay, one, we're used to pain, so we kind of brush it off. But two, we were always told it was normal, and we thought everyone else had this level of pain. And so you just go about pretending it's not there because you think that's what everyone else is doing. And the ways to be able to keep going when something's out of place or etc., etc. It's something that's kind of taught and handed down and passed on, sometimes unknowingly, many times unknowingly, whether it's an appropriate coping technique or it's not. With EDS, ignoring the pain isn't necessarily an appropriate coping technique. But if you don't know what's causing it and your family says that it's normal, it's just growing pains is a huge one, and growing pains runs in the family, and just deal with it. And yes, okay, it lasts for years and years, and even when you're not growing anymore, but that's normal. That's all it is. Everyone else is going through it. Just deal with it. I mean, isn't that basically what happened in our family till we found out actually there's a medical cause to this? Yeah. And so you deal with it, and you get and literally in our family it's said, if you took painkillers for every pain you had, you'd never be off painkillers.
Yeah, it's bad.
That literally is said in our families. In our families. And that was before we knew about EDS. Honestly, that's true. There are many people with EDS who cannot function without painkillers.
These are the fancy shoes they got. Because they look freaking good. So they could be used as dress shoes, is what I was thinking.
Oh, did we want to go to the bank first? Let's do that so I don't forget. I was going to take you to Tate's, but I just thought of that.
Yes.
And then I can stream for longer. So, honestly, and many times I find that those are people who it doesn't necessarily run in the family. They didn't have a clue about it. Or, I mean, the family has not experienced this for years. I hear of others who, like our family, that's just, you push through the pain until it's at a point you literally cannot push through it anymore. And then you take some painkiller, just minimal enough to push through the pain.
Obviously, it doesn't all, certain people, for instance, me, have it a lot better than others. And so they can take painkillers to help. That's kind of what I did for a lot of my life, but it doesn't help really. It just takes the pain away for a little while, but then you have to deal with it still because it comes back.
Yeah. And so the same thing's true with depression and other mental illnesses. These types of coping techniques are taught. So, to really understand my mental health journey, you kind of have to go back to the fact that I believe EDS is known to be a risk factor for depression. I'm sure a lot of people can understand if you're in pain all the time, dealing with everything else, life can get really discouraging, especially if you don't know the cause of the pain. It can get really, really discouraging. And so then all the other things start to happen. We have plenty of indications. Both of my grandmothers probably had EDS. I've heard some things that my grandfather probably also had EDS on my mother's side. So it's possible both my grandma and grandpa on my mother's side had EDS. So then you take that, which really shows why it's so common in the family. Plus, if you go back through, I think I'm finding signs of great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, but less proof. A little bit less proof, but still some hints that it was there. So, my grandmother, I remember she spent most of the time I knew her really rarely ever moving from her chair. And some of that probably was pain, but I wonder how much of that was also depression. And so you throw the two together and you can kind of see it. But one thing to keep in mind is the area I grew up in, suicide was during the time I grew up in. If you know the area I grew up in, if you know where I live now, you know where I grew up. I'm going to make that clear. And you put everything together, you realize that, yeah, suicide was taught for many years to be horrible. Now, it never came directly, while it was said it was horrible by the leaders of the church too, of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they never said what was actually taught, which was that if you commit suicide, it was the same as committing murder, and you were lost for life. For eternity. You were basically, there was no hope for you. And in Revelation. It was what was taught. And so not just the fat person, but the family was also looked down on extremely for committing suicide. And their friends and everyone. I mean, it had a negative impact of extreme measures.
Right.
And so when you consider how extreme those measures were.
92.
Yeah. I need to pull some money out of my account. Yeah. Yep. That's why I was saying it. So.
Should I mute?
No.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. August 11th, right?
I think so. No, it's August 10th.
Okay.
That's right. Tomorrow's the 11th.
So I'll talk in just a minute. Trying to remember how to fill out a check type thing. Biggest bills or how?
Sure.
Biggest bills would work.
No. I don't care.
So back to what I was saying. Hand me that in case they need it. That's why I asked him. Most of them know me, but that works. So, back to what I was saying. So it was really looked down on. So I wonder how many of family members previously had depression, but suicide was out because of that, because of how severe it was. So, growing up, I had severe hormonal depression. And so severe usually is put in place, that diagnosis, when you have frequent thoughts of suicide or attempts of suicide. The hormonal part was because it was figured out that mine was specifically caused by my hormones. And I'll go into that in a while. So I had, on top of unknown EDS, I had that. And at the time, I also, I went through an instance when I was 8 to 10 that left me with post-traumatic stress disorder that I didn't get treatment for. Well, by not getting treatment for the incident, I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder. So, 3 different things. One leads to more common PTSD and depression. So one diagnosis makes the other two more likely, and I had the other two. So as a teenager, I would seriously consider suicide every 3 to 6 months. And really the only thing that stopped me was my dad. Worry about how he'd feel. Nothing else There was literally nothing else I cared about. The thing about that is, and I want to make it very clear, had I not had that, sadly, I was at the point, and we're going to have trouble hearing because we have a vehicle beside us. Just a minute. Sorry. Okay, we'll open the window when when they either come or stuff. So I was at the point where I had too much medical knowledge to go with this depression. Here he comes. Thank you. That one goes up top. Okay, so I had too much knowledge, medical knowledge, to go with my depression. Had I actually attempted suicide, it wouldn't have been an attempt. I would not be here. I actually later on talked to doctors once I had treatment and was feeling better and stuff. And I told and they asked, they said, one of them asked when I said that, they said, "What do you mean? What would you have done?" And I told them, and they said, "You're right, you wouldn't be here." So many times, and they basically told me so many times they hear people say that, and they know that things could have happened to where it wouldn't have worked, or, things like that. When I told them what I would have done, they went, "Crap! One, if you ever get depressed, you darn well better be on it ASAP, because there would be no saving your life. You would be gone." And it actually, because of that, they watched me even closer. And I'll explain that in a little while. Second, so there's that. So but all during school, other than 1 year, I was bullied. During high school, so junior high school, I got some good friends, and I had friends plus other people would bully. It wasn't the friends who were bullying, let me make that very clear, but there were other people who would bully me. My friends often said I took the bullying like water off a duck's back. Little did they know what was going on underneath. And that's what, as I said, we learned to put on a face. I learned a lot younger than many people learn. So there's that. I think the worst bullying actually came the year before I met my friends. So I moved in 1 year, and we moved out the next year and moved to the last place I went to school. So that 1 year was the worst. I have a page of my yearbook from that year that actually I glued 2 pages together because of how bad it was. It was horrible. So, I've been through bullying. I get it. But to show you just how good of a face I put on, so that you know not to judge my friends by what I did, that they would have had no clue. There was one time, and it only happened one time, But I was walking with my friends. We were just walking, talking, and I was having a extremely bad time. And one of them all of a sudden said, "Hey, you're being really quiet. What's going on? Are you okay?" And I just said, "Just thinking." And quickly put on my mask again. And they believed it. That's how good I was at disguising what was going on. Here, I had honestly been contemplating suicide. Literally, while I'm walking with them, I'm contemplating suicide. And I was able to make them believe that I just had just been really thinking about something. And that was it. And that I was from everything they knew could pick up, I was happy. Even at that point, I was happy. I've talked to some of them since, and they were shocked that I ever went through that. They were like, "No, you were one of the happiest in the group. And you were also one of the ones that could help, that was the most helpful to those of us who dealt with depression." Now, we had been told the number was 1 in every 4. And in our group, the joke was, it was 1 in every 4 did not have depression. The other 3 did, to some degree or other. And I talked many people out of suicide. Even as many times, even while I was contemplating suicide myself. It's very two-faced. And yet it also shows a point. I would think that I wasn't worth it. That there was, the world would be better off without me. I would seriously think the world would be better off without me. As I literally was managing to save the lives of many different people, but the world would be better off without me. This one thing my daughter said when we did the live stream is that depression does not touch the logical part of your brain. You know what you're thinking is not logical. You know what you're going through is not logical. But that does not change what you're going through. And it does not change your thought process or anything else. And we'll just snap out of it. It doesn't work. Because it's not logical. You can't use the logical part of your brain to control the other part of your brain. To control that. It's illogical. And that's what's so hard about depression and mental illness and everything else. So what happened? Well, there were times throughout school, whatever, my mom suspected depression. Things like that. Now, honestly, the hints that she used that, well, you've got depression, it's what's causing all this pain or this or that. It actually wasn't depression. I was actually in pain. And now I know that it was due to EDS. So, the idea that something was wrong, something was wrong, but it wasn't what she thought, and I knew all the right answers. And so they couldn't ever diagnose me with depression because they didn't have anything to go off other than what I told them and my mom's words on, well, she's missing school a lot and things like that, and so it's got to be due to depression, that now I know was due to Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Just, it wasn't known I had it. It was for, so I went through high school, got engaged, had not had my MMR because I was at the age where they have a age range you're supposed to get it, and my mom was waiting till the end of the age range, and we rarely visited doctors, stuff like that. And so then they changed the age range right at when I would have had to get it for school. They changed the age range again, and they changed it. They lowered it. Well, so people quit looking, so they didn't check. I think right about that time we moved too. So we'll see. So here I was. I have all my records from the other places, and unlike now where they literally check, where they generally check every single shot, they saw that I'd been in school, whatever else, so they assumed that I'd gotten the shot, the MMR, the second MMR, and I hadn't. So now I'm 17 and looking at getting married. Well, I knew enough about the MMR and stuff like that I knew, one, you did not want to be pregnant if you got the MMR shot. You didn't want to get the MMR shot while you were pregnant. You didn't want to get any of those diseases while you were pregnant. And there was a period of time after you got the MMR shot that you shouldn't get pregnant. So I went on birth control. And for the first time in my life, I experienced a different level of happiness. A level of happiness I didn't really know existed. And it lasted. I mean, it wasn't like happy points. And my thought processes, that where I talked about logic versus, the illogical, that idea of what the heck, I can't, of those illogical thoughts were gone. And they were just gone. I didn't deal with them at all anymore. So I went, okay, this is interesting. Didn't think much of it. A while later, went off birth control to get pregnant. After getting married, and just thought, okay, some people had said, and I just thought I outgrew my teenage years. And I got pregnant pretty quickly. Within 2 or 3 months of starting to try, I was pregnant. So, went through near the end of the labor. I went into preterm labor right on Thanksgiving Day. I was like 35 weeks at that point. They stopped my labor, put me on Tributaline, dealt with all that, whatever, and then a week before Christmas, or a few days, I can't remember. Anyway, no, it was the day before Christmas. They diagnosed me with preeclampsia, and they said that basically I had to lay down. They would follow up after Christmas the next week. They would follow up the next week. I was allowed to go to our family Christmas stuff, but I had to lay down the whole time. And I'm starting to feel worse and worse and worse. And I have no explanation for it. And I think this was like Wednesday or Thursday. Saturday, I don't feel movement, go in for a non-stress test, whatever. Monday, we get into the doctor's office, and he talks to us about things and whatever. Oh, and over the weekend, I started to have suicidal thoughts. And I brought that up, too. And the doctor says, well, you know what? Let's just deliver you. It's probably because you've been probably because of the pregnancy. Let's deliver you. That'll fix it. And I was having suicidal thoughts. He said, so this is the easiest way. And then we can start you on meds and you'll be just fine. Okay, so I delivered that day. He actually came really quickly. His placenta, considering so the appointment was at 11, I believe, 10:30 or 11. And you know how doctors' offices are. You usually don't get in immediately. And so we did that. He put in a catheter with water in it to expand me, because he said, I can't just send you in to be induced. They won't allow me to do that. So let's try this, because you probably should have delivered by now anyway, knowing when you went into preterm labor and everything. So, and I wasn't past my due date yet. Let me make this very clear. My due date was like the 6th of January, and it was the 29th of December. So part of his not being able to induce was probably the fact that, or the 4th or something like that, was probably the timing too. Because of the beliefs in the world and everything else. So, and in general, they're true, but so that actually worked, and I hit a 5 just from doing that. He sent me up to by 3 or so. He sent me up to the 3 to somewhere between 3 and 4. Sent me up to the ER. They put me on Pitocin because they realized where I was at. No, they didn't even, I don't know if they used Pitocin or not. I can't remember. My son was delivered at 7:30. His placenta came out in 3 to 4 different pieces. I was hemorrhaging. It had calcified. The doctor didn't tell me this. He just got mad at me because I didn't have an epidural. And I hadn't needed one, even felt pain, enough pain until I reached transition. In fact, that's one thing. Nowadays, I have basically been instructed to tell all ERs and everything. Whenever someone asks where I'm at on the pain scale, I am required to tell them that my 7 is transition. Because that's where it is for me. Transition is a 7 on the pain scale. And usually the minute they hear that, they start taking me a lot more seriously. When I'm saying my level's at like a 5 or a 6 or things like that. They all of a sudden, and I said, I can imagine worse pain than that. And have done, etc. and have dealt with it and stuff. And so they adjust it. They start and I was able to say, I'm able to say, I was talking during transition. I was able to talk in transition. Which, that's one of you can't be that high on a pain scale if you are still talking. Well, I was talking in transition. So they take me a lot more seriously with where I say my levels are. which is sad that it takes that, but so there's that. He got here, they put me on a medication, one of the usual depressive medications, and kept an eye on me, and it wasn't working. And I actually called up the office and talked to him, and one of the guys, the physician's assistant, said, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on, and we're going to put you on birth control and just see. Because I told him that I used to deal with this, and I hadn't had a problem since going on birth control. And he went, I think I know what's going on. So he put me on birth control. And I was fine. 3 weeks or so of being miserable, back to where I had been, and a few days to a week on birth control, and I was back. It was good. This was good. And I met with him later on, and he said, you have hormonal birth control. Or not hormonal birth control, hormonal depression. The birth control stopped the depression because it adjusted your hormones. You weren't off it long enough that you went back into depression before you got pregnant. The pregnancy then started producing those hormones. And I said, so why was I that depressed while I was still at the end of my pregnancy? And he said, because the placenta had basically died. It was barely supporting your child. Another few days and you would have been giving birth to a stillborn. You should have been allowed to go into labor when you first went into labor. You are overdue at 39 weeks. And he said the other thing to be aware of is any pregnancy we need to watch it and get you back on birth control within about a week. We want to give about a week to allow the hormones, or to allow your milk supply to get in, but we also can't take the risk. Birth control birth control is known for affecting the milk supply, but it's better to affect the milk supply, reduce the milk supply, or get rid of it than to get rid of the mom. Have mom kill herself. So, you will be going back on birth control from now on, if I have any say in it, within a week after delivery. And that's the way you should be treated from here on out. And that's basically what he told me. So, then, the importance of this I'll go into later. So, then he attempted again when my son was about 1.5 years, 2 years old, and we had started trying again. I lost that. I was pregnant, got pregnant right about when it happened, and we lost that pregnancy to miscarriage. Then I got pregnant again, and he committed suicide actually during that pregnancy. And it was my husband at the time, ex-now's twin. And so that really affected him, and they put him on depression medication because he was then threatening suicide. My ex-husband now, but husband at the time. And I was having trouble gaining weight. I'd had I'd had hyperemesis with my first one, and I had hyperemesis with my second one. But the doctor insisted that it was due to depression. So they put me on. They found out the other medication hadn't worked. And I said, no, they've said it's hormonal depression that I've got. Nope, it's not hormonal. I know, it can't be hormonal. And just a few things like that. And it was kind of frustrating. Put me on medication. And it did nothing. Literally, weight didn't come up. Didn't stop the hyperemesis. The works. Eventually, and then I had my child. I had that child. And within a few days to a week, I was depressed again and ready to, and I had family lined up. Thank heavens. Aware. So we were all watching for signs. I was making sure I would get the treatment I need, whatever else. So it was not a big deal. I'm looking for something. It was not a big deal, but thank heavens I had it, because guess who ended up in depression again? And seriously contemplating suicide. So the doctor realized he was wrong, admitted he was wrong, said, obviously, that medication doesn't work for you either. So, oh well. At least we know birth control works. We'll have to try and figure out next time what to do. So, next time comes along. And I watch, and I'm going through a stressful time, and I'm watching, and my friends and family are watching, and I have no signs of depression. The thoughts aren't there. The desire to attempt suicide isn't there. It's gone. At one point, someone tried to insist I needed put on medication and told the doctor that, and the doctor said, why would I put her on medication for something that, first of all, we've proven these medications don't work for her. And we're running out of options. 2, she's not showing up as depressed. And it's not just she knows what to say. I know how she is when she's depressed. I've dealt with her before. She is not depressed. She should not be on medication. And basically refused to be bullied to put me on depression meds. So I was very grateful. And he even said, I've watched her through 2 pregnancies now. I know what it's like when she gets depressed. She is not depressed after this pregnancy. She should not be on depression medicines. But you said she's got severe depression. I said she had severe hormonal depression, and signs are that this baby has changed her hormones enough that she does not deal with it anymore. So, I was very grateful to the doctor for that. Obviously have some complaints about the people who tried to force him into putting me on medications, but that's another story. With life had for the birth control cycle. Then got pregnant again. And then and lost that one. Within a few months after losing that one, the marriage broke down. So I was actually grateful because because if the timeline had stayed the same, and I'm not saying it would have, but if the pregnancy had not stopped the signs that came about that caused the end of the marriage, then I would have, we would have separated in, I believe it was June, July, and I would have had the baby in August, September. So, very grateful, so I'm not saying that was a bad thing. I'm not saying it was easy, but I'm not saying it was a bad thing. After the divorce, I started having flashbacks to the incident that caused the PTSD. And we realized that I actually had PTSD. Got married, had a set of twins, and then had some really, really, really stressful things happen. And I went to the doctor and I said, I'm not depressed. I don't feel depressed. It's just, I'm overwhelmed. And a few things like that, told him what was going on, talked to him, and he put me on alprazolam for very, very, very short term. Let me make that clear. It was like enough for 2 to 5 days, I think, max. Just enough to help me get through a couple of days, deal with what was going on, everything else. And all of a sudden, my obnoxious PTSD symptoms went away. One thing my sister said was she could not remember a time I could carry on one conversation for more than a few seconds, maybe a minute max. This conversation, I wouldn't have got back on the same thought train. I would have talked about something else for quite a while and then jumped back to it with no warning later on. So I would have been all over the place. And literally all over the place. When my oldest was a baby, I actually had been tested for ADHD, and I had all of the textbook symptoms, which you're only supposed to have a few of. I had all of them. I was all over the place. So we started doing some research into why, found out that childhood PTSD mimics ADHD. So obviously, and I want to make this clear first of all, the only symptom that had remained, major symptom that had remained, was I could multitask. I could do 2 or 3 or 4 things at once, which was actually very helpful. And so I was not sad about not losing that. That was actually one thing that many people had said, that if I did get treated for ADHD, they didn't want to see that going because they knew how much I had on my plate and everything. And all of a sudden, here was a treatment that wasn't even this was an answer, not a treatment. But it wasn't even for ADHD, it was for PTSD. In fact, the mechanism is the exact opposite of all ADHD medicines, at which point they knew it was not ADHD, it was PTSD. One of the first treatments they try for PTSD is depression meds, anxiety/depression meds. That already tried me on 2 of the 3 different type of depression meds that are appropriate for PTSD. So they tried me on the third. And within days, I lost all inhibitions and I was ready to kill. And the minute the doctor heard that, he's like, yeah, no, get off that ASAP. I hope. I'm like, I already am. The minute we realized that was the last dose. You know, the dose I'd had just prior to that was the last dose. I'm not taking that again. He said, I agree. I'll get back to you. I've got to do some research. We got to figure something out. So I know he did a bunch of research. He came back and he said there's this new medication, Buspar, that it was developed for people in the Army coming back from Desert Storm with PTSD. That was the purpose. It was specifically developed for that. It is a longer form of alprazolam, basically. So you can't get addicted to it. But it acts the very same as alprazolam, which we know works for you. So, let's try this one. See what happens. And he said, I want you to watch very carefully. We're going to watch for any symptom of any of these problems you've had. And it worked. And I was actually on it for a number of years. Eventually trying to figure out why I was getting signs of arthritis in my hands. We went off all medication just in case it was a side effect of a medication, whatever else. And with the agreement that I was to watch for any symptoms of 1, depression, 2, ADHD / PTSD. In the meantime, I'd quit having flashbacks, the works. So, none of those came back, so it was decided I would be kept off the medication, with the option of going back on if I ever needed it again. So, we became very grateful at that point that we had not treated ADHD, because actually the mechanism was such it probably would have caused actually more problems. But we would have treated if necessary. So where does my daughter come into this? How would my daughter understand? Well, my daughter has been diagnosed with PTSD, with some depressive tendencies. They put her on the one that I was put on. For the last one I was put on before Buspar, with the caveat that we needed to monitor closely, see what was happening. As we monitored, she realized she was getting angry. Most of the problems she had, she's severe social anxiety, claustrophobia. A lot of those were a lot more manageable to gone, but she was getting angry, which anger is another part of PTSD. So the doctor wanted to keep the good that the other one had done, but get rid of the anger. So he also tried her on Buspar. And she has continued on this mix since it's been over a year. And she's happy on the mix. She can tell when she misses her medication. She's also on a sleeping med because of the EDS. But she's very happy with the combination. And the reason I'm sharing this, that it is my daughter, and the full details, is because she shared it on that stream. And she basically said, that's the thing is be aware and support people. Know that it's not them choosing, that there's no just get over it. That each person has different things that'll work to be able to help them through. There's no shame in mental illness of any form. And that treatment can bring along with it an amazing quality of life and can help deal with those thoughts that you have deal with the illogical thoughts was the basic gist. I wish I could get her exact words, but she said them in the moment, and YouTube didn't save it. Now, on top of that, I have a child who started threatening suicide at 8 years old, and many people didn't believe me. Down the road, it was realized he does have depression, and he was put on the same medicine as for the depression medicine that my daughter's on, and was watched really closely. He did not have any adverse side effects to it, and as long as he gets his medication, he's a lot happier. It helps him deal with life. He's more active, things like that. I say as long as he gets his medication, because he still struggles with remembering, etc. So, that's my experience. Also, my mom, after menopause, started having trouble with depression. And she was able to control it with St. John's wort. So, I loved one thing that stood out to me a lot, I should say. And I loved that Animagua said was the words, the quote, "A fight worth fighting, a life worth living." Now, you may think you haven't made a difference to someone. Let me tell you another story that in a little ways relates, but can help show you the difference one person can make. And that it doesn't take a lot. So I said throughout my school years, I basically was bullied. The year before my worst year was the one year I was not. School started out as normal. There were hints that it was going to be normal. I was going to be bullied again. At that time, 6th grade, it was my 6th grade year. So my 7th grade year was the year I was bullied. This was my 6th grade year. And where I was living at the time, 6th grade, you basically were with the same class all the time, but would move to different classrooms for certain subjects. And it was not all the 6th grade classes did this, but our teacher had worked with another 1 or 2 teachers, and they decided to each teach what they were strong in and teach all 3 classes what they were strong in, 2 or 3 classes. And so we would switch go to the other teacher's classroom for that. But in general, it was just one. It was all together. Now we had regular recesses and things like that, which they don't do really in a lot of 6th grade. Well, I think it varies. Anyway, so we did that. And I was one of the ones who would sit against the wall and read a book. Kind of can see why, knowing I've got EDS. But I didn't know why at the time. I just knew I didn't like playing most sports. There was only one sport I liked, I really liked, and I was good at. And that was, at the time, dodgeball. Now, younger people may not know what dodgeball is. You have two teams and one of those big rubber bouncy balls, like the blow-up kind. And they needed to be rubber and bouncy because of how it worked. So, and you had to be able to hold on to it, etc. So, we would throw these, and I was going to say the ones at like Walmart, they don't work quite as well, but they hurt more when you get hit with them and a few things like that. And they usually aren't quite as bouncy. So, you would throw them at each other, like there was only one ball. You'd start it out, I can't remember exactly how you'd start it, and these are the rules where I was. I don't know if there's other rules for other places. So you'd start out, and you would, let's say your team got the ball at first. You'd throw it to try and hit someone on the other team. If you hit someone on the other team, they were out. If they caught it, you were out. If it missed, no one was out. And then they would throw it back. And sometimes you'd do 2 or 3 balls or whatever. And so you can imagine with EDS, the ability I had to contort, which would leave me with the ability to stay in for a long time. Now, in our group, in our school, once you hit a certain point, you could, so most your team was out. It was like, if there were like 5 people left or something was all, you could choose which of the people that were out would get to come in. For if you caught it, or I can't remember, there were certain rules, but you would be able to choose. So I would always be one of the first chosen, because if I was on your team, 1, chances were I was never going out. 2, I could judge how fast that ball was coming, and if it was worth it for me to catch the ball or not. And so, when I could, I'd catch the ball. When I couldn't, I'd know I couldn't, and I wouldn't catch the ball. But you wouldn't hit me with that ball either. No matter what you tried, if I got hit, it was right near the first, and it was very rare. So I was always one, so if I got out, I was basically the first back in. And I'd do it, because it would be harder to move around with that many people that's why usually I think why I'd end up out is it's kind of hard to contort yourself when you have someone almost right against you on each side. It's kind of hard to see, judge, contort, etc. So, I'd just kind of go with the flow. And if I got out, I'd quickly be back in and would be good. Or not quickly, they'd wait till a few people got out and there was more room, and then I'd be in. So, this was basically that was the game. Now, with childhood PTSD, the reason it mimics ADHD is you learn to judge what's going around you as a protective mechanism. So in this case, imagine someone that they know when you enter a room. I think everyone knows someone like that. It may be actually a form of PTSD. I would know, even if my back was towards you, I would know if someone if you had entered the room. Sometimes I could tell who it was, sometimes I could just tell that someone had. Even to this day, when I walk in a room, I frequently know every single exit just by a quick glance around the room. Things like that. Protective mechanism. Because if something were to happen, I needed to be prepared to get out. So you can imagine how well that would help with, and I could hear too that well. Let me make that clear. Not only would I know if someone entered the room, but it was kind of funny, at our bus stop, we frequently would have a guy come down the road speeding. And there was a group of us. Well, I would be out playing and I'd go, "Get off the road, he's coming!" And everyone would jump off the road. And a little while later, once plenty of time for everyone to get off, here would come this guy, barrel, "We need to get off the road, go to the other side, let's go play on," "No, they're coming this way from that side. We need to stay on this side." But just trust me, and no one got hit the whole time I was there. I could tell which direction they were coming from, which direction they were going, and far enough in advance that people could move. So all of this, I'm sure you can imagine, helped play dodgeball because of the rules. But at the time, dodgeball wasn't played very often during PE, like during 5th grade and before, and even at the beginning of 6th grade. So I'd just sit off by myself and read. And we had some of the more popular girls in our class. And then one of the guys, the most popular guy, started to talk to me. And I was like, okay, this is weird. And he'd come sit down by me rather than go play. And I'm like, "Why aren't you playing? I know you enjoy sports," because he really did. It was obvious. "I know you enjoy playing with them." And, "No, I just want to talk to you. I want to get to know you, whatever else." And within a little while, the only game they ever played during PE was dodgeball. And it was always, "Come on, we really need you. Come play with us. You're our best player." And so I would go play. And I feel bad for this group. I'm sorry if you're any one of these people. You saw what happened. If you aren't any of these people, but you know them, please tell them I'm sorry. Because obviously I couldn't do anything. I did the best I could while I could. Anyway, so they started playing dodgeball, and we usually played class against class. In my class, "But we need you, you're our best player," which, from everything I remember, I was. So I could honestly believe this. Christmas rolls around, and right before Christmas break, some of the most popular girls give me a present. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Now, I need to make it clear. I grew up in a poor family, which very frequently anyone who grew up when I did knows that often in and of itself that was probably the cause of the bullying. And I'm like, I didn't even get you anything. No, it's okay. We didn't want you to. That's why we waited until this late. And it was a brand new outfit or two, and etc., so that you can be one of us. We know that you can't afford it. We just wanted you to, have something new, brand new and nice and whatever else. And that year was the best year of my life in school, up even till 8th grade. After that, from 8th grade on, I can't say for sure, because that year I had friends, and there was no other bullying, but they weren't as good of friends as I would make starting in 8th grade. One of my 8th grade friends is still my best friend to this day. So, but why do I tell the story? That one boy that went out of his schedule, that went out of his way and befriended me and got everyone else to be nice to me and to get to know me and whatever else. We moved after that year. He probably has no clue what a difference that made in my life. He has no clue that the very next year was the worst year of bullying I would ever go through. I had very few friends in my 7th grade year, and a lot of bullies. And bullies to the point that it was worse than any of the bullying I'd had up to that point, or any of the bullying I had after that. And it was the hope that I would once again have the experience that I'm sure that I remember thinking that was part of what kept me going, was not everyone was that bad. And gave me hope the next year, the 8th grade year, when Wood moved again, to be willing to try to have friends, to not completely shut down, close myself off everything. I'm sure that guy has not a clue in the world that he made that difference in someone's life. Honestly, I don't even remember the kid's name. But it made a huge difference. So, what difference can one person make? He didn't go buy me anything that I know of. He didn't do anything but give a bit of his time. And yet that bit of his time made a significant difference in my life. And led to it being that year being one of the happiest years of my school career. All because he took a few minutes. So, you never know when that one smile, that little bit can make a world of difference to someone who is not having a good time. And there is things you can do. Now, at the same time, I am not going to go with the usual that I was told growing up that, well, if you're feeling bad about yourself, you're thinking about yourself too much, So get off your butt and go serve someone else. And if you're still feeling bad while you're serving someone else, you better serve more. You aren't working hard enough. Work harder. And work harder. And harder. And harder. That actually can be detrimental. There is a balance, and be aware that that there is treatments out there that can help. That service is not always the only answer to feeling better. Many times, for especially severe depression, you may need to go on medication. And there's no shame in that. You may need to go to counseling. There is no shame in that. Honestly, the shame should be in those who tell others that one mode of treatment is the only, and not even of treatment, that getting treatment is something to be ashamed of. That's where the shame should lie. Is those who discourage others from receiving treatment. Period. Nowhere else. So, and even then, if you've done that in the past, you can make up for that. Be nice to others. Help others realize. Make a change. Realize, just as everything with racism, many people were raised this way. They don't know better. But as you learn better, you quit doing it. When you quit doing, and then you look for ways to support those who may have been hurt by someone who believed the same as you used to believe, or as your parents or your grandparents, etc. And to encourage those who have gone through depression, to be a support to those who deal with racism, etc. That's the difference. And can you be ashamed of your family member who is constantly putting down people who have depression? Oh yeah, there's no issue there. Definitely. That's appropriate. Does that mean that you need to let it eat at you? No. As long as it's not your decision, don't take responsibility for others' decisions. You can try and help them realize where they're wrong in their beliefs. But don't beat yourself up because your mom, your dad, your children, now if they're your children, try and help them understand what they're doing is wrong. But, etc. And even don't beat yourself up for what happened in the past. Because we all make mistakes. And we can't change the past. We can change the future. And as long as we are focused on changing the future and making the future a better place for all to live, then we are doing the best we can. If you ever did that, you probably were doing it from what you were taught. That's the way you were taught. You didn't know anything else, so that's the way you believe. And when you learn it's wrong, you quit doing it to help educate others that it's wrong. And that's the way the world becomes a better place. Not by sitting beating ourselves up, by constantly groveling, etc. Oh, I'm a horrible person because of this, that, whatever. If you put yourself down for it, your body has a way of, this doesn't make me feel good, so I'm not going to continue. Your body and your mind. And so you stop. Instead, if you accept that it was wrong and have worked towards having a change of mind and allow yourself that change of mind and allow others that change of mind, the world can become a better place. Why would you want to walk through a bed of hot coals? Unless there was something on the other side of that bed of hot coals that was worth going through. Now, a change in beliefs is frequently not appealing enough to go through that bed of hot coals, which is what insisting that people constantly grovel and, oh, I'm a horrible, 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 horrible person, even though I've changed my beliefs. Now I'm still horrible because I used to believe this, etc. That's like insisting that they walk through a bed of hot coals to have a change. Instead, what if we let them walk through a nice mountain meadow or something like that? Or on the beach for those who enjoy the beach, or etc. They're going to want to do it. Not only are they going to want to do it, they're going to want to encourage others to do it. And as they encourage others to do it, still more people are going to want to do it. And more and more and more. And the world becomes a better place for all involved. That is one reason I don't agree with the narrative of anyone putting themselves down for what's happened in the past, but that doesn't mean you brush it off. You know, if someone's been mean to you in the past, you don't forget that they've done it. But as they prove to you that they've changed, you know, you trust cautiously. Give them as they seem to have changed, then you give them a little bit more trust, etc., until you see that, yes, they have changed. And that's then, and honestly, that's what forgiveness is giving people the chance to become a better person than they were. And so we need to be aware of this and aware what we're asking of other people. So, that's my feeling on both what was said and both what he said and mental health in general, specifics of mental health, etc. I hope that helps you guys. That maybe there's something. Oh, there is another thing I wanted to address. And that was in one of the groups I'm part of. The fact that people who are depressed often don't take care of themselves. The things like getting a haircut, etc., they don't go do that. And I wanted to share with you guys something to consider and something to think about in regards to that. So, when you are having a really busy time in life, maybe you've gotten a lot of you've got a lot of demands on your time, you've got you're just overwhelmed. What do? Do you go get that haircut when you have 1,000 other places you need to be right now, etc., etc., etc.? And most people will say, of course not. You wait. And you get it when things calm down. Well, if you think about the things you're going through when you're like that, be aware that for someone with depression, that's their life. Especially when they're at their worst with depression. They are overwhelmed. Maybe illogically, but they're overwhelmed. And so for them to get up and maybe it's brush their hair, maybe it's go get a haircut, getting dressed, different things like this. And I'm looking for something specific, that's why I'm going through all of them. Because I know there's one for a gift and to increase the gifts you get, and I'm looking for that. Anyway, so while I'm looking, I'll keep talking. So this is what they're going through. They are overwhelmed. And then someone judges them. And they're already overwhelmed. Let's see. And people get mad at them for not doing more. They're already doing as much as they can. And this is what you're doing. So imagine taking your hardest times when you have the most on your plate. That's what I was looking for. You have the most on your plate ever. How would you feel if someone all of a sudden starts complaining about what you are doing and reminding you of all this stuff that you know you have to do and asking why it's not already done? That is what you're doing to someone who has depression when you do that. Instead of saying, hey, you know what? I know you're having a hard time. Can I do this for you? Can I do that for you? What can we do so that you feel good about doing this? If I call and schedule the appointment and then come pick you up, and we go do something fun after together, would that work for you? Now, don't just schedule it. Make sure. But things like that. Ask. And be aware that that's what they're going through. I know everyone has a point in time where they're overwhelmed, where they've been overwhelmed with everything they have to do, everything on their plate. That is what someone with depression goes through on a daily basis. Their mental thought process, something to be aware of. Your mind is a really strong thing. An extremely strong thing. And can get overwhelmed very easily. So when and you've experienced that with some of those things, be aware that that's what they're going through. It's not that they're choosing to not do this or that, to not take care of themselves. It's that their body literally is overwhelmed. One thing with EDS I've realized is that and here's another example. If you remember taking the ACT and the time studying before the ACT and everything else, the next day after you were done, you were exhausted. And the next day you were exhausted. Brain power uses energy. For someone with depression, they have their logical thought process constantly telling them that this other major thought process in their body is not appropriate and not logical. It makes no sense. And they constantly have this battle going on in their own brain, saying, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. The example of the angel and the devil, that is a constant thing for someone with mental illness. And at least from my experience, from my daughter's experience, and from things I've heard from others. So imagine the brain power that goes into that. That brain power means that much less ability to do physical things. There's been studies on the amount of brain work that's put in by wives and mothers. How men, when they're left with a list of things, to take care of children, are usually also left with a list of things, and they're overwhelmed by the time a few days is over. And often that's with their wife or mother having done a lot of prep work in advance. Everyone's heard the joke that for a mom, a vacation is not a vacation. It's getting home from the vacation that's slightly a vacation. And that's jumping back into daily life, is a vacation from a vacation. Because of all the planning and everything else that went into making it happen. And so especially, so there's all that. Now, another thing to be aware of, a lot of people are not aware that just changes in circumstances, etc., can lead to a worsening of symptoms or bring things to the point where coping techniques don't work. Everyone's heard of postpartum depression in women. A lot of people aren't aware. Postpartum depression is not just something that a woman deals with. There are men who also have postpartum depression. So basically, if your family member or friend, whatever, has had a change and starts seeming different, like they're overwhelmed, talk to him. Don't be afraid to, that was me. Don't be afraid to broach the subject of mental health and possibly getting treatment, etc. The more mental health is approached, talked about, the less of stigma will be around it, the more people will get treated, and hopefully that will reduce the amount of people lost to suicide. And the loss, and it's not just suicide. There's also, I can tell you right now, that Animagua has had a lot of his ability to do things for others reduced because of this. Even as he put on a show, as he pretended it wasn't happening, etc., it affected him. And he couldn't do as much as he will hopefully be able to, but at the same time, he may have pushed himself further than he should have. So don't expect that we'll see more as he gets appropriate treatment, but hopefully he will be able to see the change in what he's able to do. Whether it's focusing more on his time with his family, enjoying that time more, whether it be doing more things with his children, with his wife, whatever that looks like for him. I know for one part that for me, I actually quit doing as much for other people. I had been addicted to serving because that was the only time I felt good at one point. And I actually had to dial back from that and realize I need to do some things for myself. Sometimes that's what you have to do. What that looks like for each person varies and is an individual thing. But hopefully Animagua is able to see success. And anyone else who, hopefully others see this too. But there is that quantifiable part that the world is losing from those who have depression untreated by keeping this a secret and having a stigma with mental health. The world is actually worse off, not just because of those who commit suicide or attempt suicide, or there's also another aspect. And it's less quantifiable, so people don't talk about it. But it's there. And as mental illness, the stigma behind it is reduced. There is more benefit than just those obvious things. We we don't lose as many people or anyone to suicide. We don't have the health costs of people attempting suicide, etc. Those quantifiable things. There will be the unquantifiable of the mental capacities of them working with other people, things like that also come along with dealing with taking stigma out of mental illness. And that's one thing that is frequently overlooked when it's talked about. But that's something that honestly affects every person in this world. Let's say the numbers 1 out of 5 are true. Let's even say it's 1 out of 10. Everyone knows 10 people. That means one of the people that you interact with is not able to do their very best in something they do. That means you're having to pick up some of the slack from that one person who is not doing, whether it's helping their family, whether it's what it is. You're picking up that slack. So you directly are impacted by that. That means that much, if you aren't having to pick up the slack, someone you know is picking up your slack for them, is doing that much more. That means that they aren't spending that time helping, doing things to benefit you that they might do. Basically, if you take it into consideration and you times it out and you figure a lot of good could come about. Unquantifiable good could come about by getting rid of the stigma of mental illness and people immediately receiving treatment if they struggle with mental illness, whatever that treatment looks like. So you directly would be benefited from that. You may not see how. You may not think you know anyone with depression or mental illness of any sort. You do. And being willing to talk about it and be an ear for people and encourage treatment and things like that will benefit you. It may bring more benefit to other people, but it will benefit you. So you have your head in this game. Well, maybe not your head, but you're a foot in the game, or however you want to look at it. If we lose, you're hurt from it. If we win, you win. And that's something to keep in mind. And really to motivate you to be one of the ones who is determined to get rid of the stigma behind mental illness. So, I know it was a really serious topic today. Tomorrow, Brilliant event starts. Don't forget to your potions. You're going to want a trace tonic and then 2 other potions. I'll go look at it so that you can see what I'm talking about. Twitter is going to be the easiest again. So, here's what you're going to need. You're going to need the trace tonic right off the bat. Then you're going to want to, once you've got your tonic, your brilliant Monster Book of Monsters, and your two ingredients are portmanteaus, so the Monster Book of Monsters should take the longest, and hopefully that won't take very long. You're going to have brew 4 potions. That means you're going to want to have 2 1/2, 2 3/4, something like that, brewed on top of the trace tonic. Ready to use master notes on the 3rd tonic. Hopefully using the master note would finish the 3rd tonic, because then you'd get that credit for the 3rd tonic and the brew master notes, and then start your 4th tonic and have that brew. That's probably going to take the longest of all of the tasks. Collect 2 Gringotts Facade fragments. Use Brain Elixir Brewfios twice. Earn 3,000 Wizarding XP. Return 10 Brilliant Bug Rod. Complete 5 Wizarding Challenges with 3 or more teammates. Place 5 images on the Brilliant event page. And earn 5,000 XP from challenges. And then use Trace Tonic twice. Return 45 Brilliant Foundables when in your highest unlocked chamber. Brew 7 potions. So as soon as you finish the one, start more potions brewing, get them ready to go. And use 5 potions in Wizarding challenges. So, hopefully that helps you prepare for tomorrow. Hopefully what we've keep in mind what we've talked about. Think about, is there anything you can do to help? There are different organizations that help with mental illness. Not everyone with a mental illness accesses those organizations, but a lot of people do. Also, if you've had a bad experience with an organization, look it up, see how long it's been around, things like that. It's been known that sometimes some NAMI organizations have been not the greatest, but that is literally just personalities of people running that chapter. It is not the organization as a whole. So that can be a good place to look into, at least to learn more about mental illness, if nothing else. And remember, don't put yourself or anyone else down for having done something in the past. Just remember to become a better person for the future. I will hope to see you guys tomorrow. I believe today's video has been a lot longer video, and I know it's been a lot more serious than many of the ones I've done. And I'm sorry about that, but this is a serious topic that definitely needs attention brought to it. So, that's why I also chose to do it again, rather than just say, okay, YouTube was a brat and I'm not going to worry about it. We can lose that conversation. Obviously, this is a conversation that we need to have, and we need to have more often. Now, maybe not this serious, but there is a reason I've never been ashamed to say that I have dealt with stuff on this channel. So, and if anyone has questions, comments, etc., please leave them down in the comments below. I will not hesitate to either take a video to respond or just respond to the comment or both. If it's something you feel you want to talk about individually, you can private message me on Discord or Twitter or email me or a lot of the social medias I'm part of, even if it's for my other business page, whatever.